Okay, welcome back to another Between the Pages book chat. And today our guest is multi-genre and author J.D. Estrada, who's also a poet. And we're talking about his poetry book, Ballads of Hope and Joy. And I'm going to turn it over to him now and let him introduce himself as only he can. So take it away.
Well, not only me, but thank you. Greetings, fellow humans. I am your scruffy, very scruffy. I got a poofy ponytail going. JD Estrada. As Anita was so kind to say, I am a multi-genre author. I don't want to limit myself. One of my greatest fears is to ever be remotely close to a one-trick pony, and I've worked feverishly to not be one. I released this wonderful book for Mother's Day. People have been enjoying it, and I'm happy, dude, because the initial feedback for not having promoted it and saying, "Oh, I'm just going to launch it," it's been great.
Yeah, well, I got my copy. Haven't read it yet, though. But then again, I have a lot of books I haven't read yet.
And that is the never ending TBR.
Yeah. Well, that's why I joined the Indie Fantasy Addicts Summer Reading Challenge, so I can get some books read because they'll make me feel guilty about not reading books. So.
Well, the good thing for my TBR is that I've balanced it out, and I have big books or bigger books, like, in the 3, 4, 500 page, and then I have others that are shorter, and I'm like, yes, I can balance it out, and I can still get my Goodreads gold because it motivates me to read.
And Andy says hi.
Hey, how you doing, Mr. Mingle?
Okay, so tell us about the poetry book since we're here.
People always ask me, why do I write poetry? And I'm like, I didn't know that I needed to have an answer to and a reason and a motive to write poetry. Can I just enjoy it? They're like, yeah, but you like this and this and that. And I'm like, can I also like poetry? And in terms of how I go about poetry, I always try to have each collection be like a music album in terms of following a specific theme or feel or something like that. I had released 6 collections prior to this one. Each one has its own feel, and I collected those so I would have the first wave of poetry. And there's actually a volume called Recollection, or Recollection, if you want to say it that way. So this is the first book of the second wave. If you turn on the news on any channel, on any news source, no matter what political party that you like, etc., everything looks like a dumpster fire. And I was like, I think we need a shot of positivity. I needed to write something positive because if you see the Sky Thoughts that I do normally on Wednesdays, and a lot of what I do in terms of nonfiction is to try to have a positive impact and try to get myself to a better headspace, either by talking about something that is positive or getting towards that or just processing stuff. This book was me wanting to give people a hug in a book. And be silly and be quirky, and that we could achieve different types of smiles through different types of poems. Some rhyme, some don't rhyme, and are free verse and whatnot. Some are quirky. There's one about Bob Ross because I am a big fan of Bob Ross. And I think anyone from our generation that was having a rough day and saw this wonderful magical afro whacking his paintbrush and just being so zen over everything, clicked at one point or another.
Yeah, his happy little accidents.
His happy little accents. We can do a little happy tail, a little happy little. Oops, I did that, but now I can do this. And the guy was magic. And it's a shame that we lost him so early, because I think that, as long as he's still a force to be reckoned with, and he's been, he passed away quite a while ago, and that just goes to show that what sticks is either really bad or really good, and I would rather do my best to contribute to the good.
Yeah, because I mean, any artist, I think today had some influence of Bob Ross. I think you can't really find too many of them that don't know Bob Ross. So what other influences and inspirations did you use for the poems?
For this, actually, I did mention the Sky Thoughts. A lot of the beginnings of poems I took from my own Sky Thoughts. Sky Thoughts are, I take a picture of the sky or something, and I try to to have like it's some people find it sappy, some people find it saccharine. A lot of people enjoy them. To each their own. And I used those as the beginning of a lot of the poems. And I was like, I wanted to make something that came from that intention and that desire to try to have a positive impact. So that's how that worked. And life and the things that from the people who have passed on that still have an impact in my life, to Saturday morning cartoons, to cereal and stuff, anything that's made me smile at some point was fair game.
Okay, so do you have any poets that influenced your writing?
In terms of this collection,
Or any collection?
No, any collection, yeah, I can say that actually a big influence beyond Bukowski, because I think anyone who's read Bukowski has either hated him or it's had a profound impact. For me, I'm of the second sort, that I read him and I was like, wow, this is different. This is not, roses are red. It's like roses are red, whiskey is whiskey, whatever. And he would go on a tangent. But he was definitely an influence. I think everyone and their mother and parent and cousin has been influenced by Poe at some point. And someone who was a really big influence is Annie DeFranco. I'm a big fan of her music and her work, and she is as indie can get. But in terms of poetry, she definitely left a mark in me. And people go like, but aren't you a rocker? And I'm like, you can't get more rock and roll than she does. And even if she's playing acoustic and singing protest songs. So drop the candor.
Okay, I like this comment. I got to show it. Roses are red, whiskey is good. The end.
Exactly.
Yes.
Single
yes,
malt.
Being Scottish, we are in favor of whiskey, even though I don't drink it because I don't drink. But yeah, you gotta favor whiskey if you're Scottish. It's a law. So
no, for me, I do favor single malt, but I've gotten into bourbon and stuff like that because I'm living in the South. So I have to, when in Rome, drink like Romans do.
Yeah, I think Glenfiddich is even doing a bourbon now, if I'm not mistaken.
It's a different aspect to the same spirit. It's just sweeter and it's not as abrasive on the palate. It lingers more and it's got warmer tones. Whiskey is more like cut and dry, and again, just a different approach to the same thing, which it does kind of figure into poetry, because you can have the same thought and you can approach it in different ways. And I think that's what they do with whiskey, and that's what we can do with pretty much anything. And in terms of literature, anything.
Okay. So I'm curious, do you write any foreign poetry? Because I know I prefer free verse in a lot of ways, but I recently, in the last few years, have gotten into different forms and stuff, and I have my favorites. So do you do foreign poetry, or is it all just sort of off the hip or off the cuff? Or whatever?
Depends on the project, depends on the poem. Sometimes I'm working on nursery rhymes. Sometimes it's limerick. Sometimes it's I actually do have a collection of haikus that I finished a long time ago, but I also want to do the counterpart. And I want to have the haiku on one page and an art with the haiku including it in the other page. So you can have like just the words and then a visual representation with the words. So it's all about how creative you can get with the words. To give you another example, I have a poem in, if I'm not mistaken, Black Tie Affair, and it's also in a recollection, which is alliteration to zenith. And basically it's 4 words to a line, and it's alliteration in terms of the A line has 4 words that begin with A, B line, 4 words with B, and so on and so forth. And I think I do have a narrative poem called Miranda and the Broken Ghost. And that rhyme scheme was an ass kick. It was 9 lines to a stanza, 8 stanzas, and the rhyme scheme is abacadabra. And it gets to the point where you're like, I can't find anything else that rhymes with this word. What am I going to do? So that was that challenge. And to me, poetry is often it's finding a way to capture the challenge of a message, a complicated message, or something said in a different way. Or, I like form and I like substance and I like the combination of both. And I like sometimes focusing on one more than the other, and so on and so forth. Some people like a certain type of poetry and a certain type of literature. I'm more, again, I don't want to be one trick pony. And if there's anything that all of my collections share, is that they have variety. It's not always going to be free verse. It's not always going to rhyme. It's not always going to be 3 lines or 4 lines or 5 lines or however. It's not going to be couplets. It's going to be like, you know what? I want to do a couplet, so I do a couplet. And you know what? I want to do a sonnet, so I'll do a sonnet. And maybe I'll read a couple of sonnets just to have that. It's like when you listen to certain types of music so that you can internalize the rhythm. If you listen to rock, normally it's 4/4. If you listen to salsa and other types of music, a lot of Caribbean and tropical music is 3/4. It's a different beat and it hits you different. If you listen to it and get used to it and it becomes familiar, then you can execute it a lot better. And the same happens to me when it comes to poetry. When I read nursery rhymes, I suddenly internalized which nursery rhymes clicked more and which flowed more towards what I like. And it's not that I emulate or that I basically replace words with the same structure, but it just helps you understand.
Yeah. I wrote a couple of nursery rhymes. They're not for kids.
No, but it can be a lot of fun. And again, why not? And a lot of what I do is because why not? Why didn't you do that? Because
Yeah.
why not?
Yeah, that's kind of why I started writing the horror haikus, because it's like, that was fun. It's like haikus, only really horror, and putting horror into that tiny little poem
Is a challenge.
Yeah, it was a fun challenge. So, but what is the hardest poem do you think you've ever written? Because I know I wrote a chant royale once. It's not something I'll write again. I like the outcome, but no, that was a pain in the to write.
Now, I mentioned Miranda and the Broken Ghost. That one was tough because to make it work, and again, if I weren't so adamant in having a strong rhyme, it probably would have read better. But I was very, very stuck up on wanting it to be the rhyme scheme and to be a hard rhyme in it, as close a rhyme or a direct rhyme as possible. And again, Abacadabra, if you break down, that's 5 times 8. That's 40 words that have to rhyme. That's a pain in the ass. And I don't think I would ever do that again. In terms of doing a narrative story, I would probably do shorter stanzas so that I have more flexibility and can focus a lot more on the story. Again, I did it because it was a challenge and it was a fun challenge, but it gets to a point where it's like, man, I'm tired of trying to crack this nut because I'm focusing. It's like a Rube Goldberg machine. It's like you can just move the thing. No, I don't. I press a button and then this clicks and that clicks and that clicks and that clicks and then the thing moves. You can be more efficient. So that one was really hard. And in terms of, there's one. It's kind of an epic like poem because it's 800 lines long. It's 8 movements, 100 lines to every movement. Some are free verse, some have, each one has its own style and specific type of either rhyme scheme or free verse or approach to it. And so it was basically challenging myself to make 8 poems that 800 line poems that tied into one another, that were a true narrative. And that challenge was a lot of fun because it's called The Madness of Jonathan J. George. And it is an exploration of madness from the point of view of someone who has gone mad. So try to imagine that you fall into a sort of purgatory and it's you climbing out of it. And that was hard because, there's autobiographical stuff that I was sorting through at that time. And that was intense. It was an emotionally intense piece. And those are the hardest to write. They're very rewarding, but it takes out a lot of you because you're literally taking out a piece of you and giving it shape and taking control over those emotions. So having issues and sorting them and making art out of that was taxing in the best way possible.
Yeah. So I know for me, writing poetry is a far more personal um, writing exercise than, say, writing fiction. Do you find that as well?
I think you can get personal in different ways. I think the metaphors and the symbolisms that you use in either form vary, though. The stuff that I hide in fiction, if you know me, you can probably get it. But what I hide in poetry, because some stuff you just reveal and it's there, and there's other stuff that you look at a line and you go like, is anyone ever gonna figure that one out? Because that's the benefit of metaphor. Because people can interpret a certain thing even though you mean something else completely, which is also the beautiful thing about poetry. It's like song lyrics. What it means to you is not necessarily what it's going to mean to someone else, and you have to be okay with that.
Yeah. So has anything ever surprised you from a reader who's found something in your poem that you neither never intended or never saw?
In terms of surprise, I think the biggest surprise was when someone said, "Oh, you're the author of Dark Strands." It's like, you're not the author of Only Human, you're not the author of Given to Fly or the stuff that I'm most known for. They focused on a very specific poetry collection. And then they went, this poem spoke a lot to me because I also lost my dad. And I was like, damn. And for someone to be that direct, and then they were like, and it really helped me a lot. I know it's not a long poem, but it really captured what I felt as well. And to me, the surprise in that instance was that allowing myself the space to mourn and grieve and process the loss of my father in a poem was something that someone was able to resonate with. In terms of stuff that people have found that I thought they weren't gonna find, um, not yet. And in terms of interpreting stuff that wasn't there, I get that a lot. But I get that more from fiction than from poetry, which is curious. In fiction, they were like, "Oh, because you're this character," and I'm like, I literally put myself in a character, which is Fayed Odstein, and he's a recurring character in different short stories and novels that I write, because he's my own literal manifestation. It's me processed through the filter of what I love in fantasy and writing and fiction and stuff like that. So it's going to have the qualities that are in me that are like Willy Wonka or the Cheshire Cat or stuff like that. It's just amped up way more. It's part of who I am, but it's just magnified through that filter. And I'm like, that's me. And they go like, so you're not Daniel, the vampire in the human cycle. And I'm like, no. And you're not Nathaniel. And I'm like, no. But Nathaniel does have stuff. They're like my children. They have stuff that they got from me. Some good stuff, some bad stuff. Nathaniel is mopey and whiny, and occasionally I've had those instances where I just can't let something go, and I just harp on and harp on. And people say, "Oh, he's so whiny," and I'm like, "That's how I felt about myself." So I let that go. And in terms of Daniel, the temper. Sometimes we share the temper. So people say, "Oh, that's you," and I'm like, "No, this chapter, that's me. That is completely, literally me. I have the T-shirt that the character is wearing that I make mention of. So don't crack your head. Don't think that I'm hiding other stuff." And then people go like, "Oh, so are they attracted?" And they try to ship those two characters, and I'm like, I have other gay characters that are gay and that are dealing with different issues. Why do you want to make these gay? And they're like, but they make such a good match. And I'm like, I'm happy that you think so, but no, because this one's involved with this one. So it's always a curious thing with readers and what they find or what they think they find. And again, as soon as you click publish, it's no longer my story, it's our story. And the truth is somewhere in between. It's not what I say, it's not what you say, it's somewhere in between.
Yeah. Okay. So we have a question,
Mhm.
Joe. So, what's one thing in poetry you would like to try that you haven't yet?
A project that I would want to do is grunge poetry, and I want to get eventually a pedal for my guitar that does loops and stuff like that, and try to create a like a sonic background, and then write lyrics and poetry on top of that, and I want that to be the process. I don't want to be just over a notebook or a piece of paper. I want that to be the creative process, and that's something that I'm very interested in. But I still don't have the proper recording equipment or the loop pedal. So when I get that, that's something that I'm probably gonna be really shaggy, wear a lot of flannel, listen to a lot of Pearl Jam, and see what comes out. But I think that something interesting can come out, and hopefully I would strive to do my best to do something that either Mark Lanigan or Nick Cave would enjoy.
Okay, so in the new collection, do you have a favorite poem? And no is an acceptable answer.
I would say no. There are several that I really enjoy. I like the one that's based on Bob Ross, but I think that the first one that I opened the collection is very important to me because a cousin of mine, we had lost touch, and after Hurricane Maria, we reconnected. She's like, "How's the family and whatnot?" And just trying to find out information of people back home. We reconnected, super sweet. She had a partner for, I don't know, like 12 or 15 years. And unfortunately, he passed away. And she wrote me one day and she's like, can I use one of your poems for his wake? And I'm like, you can, but I'd rather write something specifically for you guys. So I was on vacation and I sat down with my notebook, had a good think, and wrote for about 15, 20 minutes. Did some minor edits, took a picture, sent it, and she loved it. And she's like, that, Hank would have loved that. And to be able to do that with a poem and do something that connects in that way with someone is very important to me, because it shows that what you do is not just for fun or for show and whatnot, and it can have a positive impact.
Yeah, indeed it can. So on that note, I think we'll wrap it up here, and I'll let you tell everyone where they can find you and your books.
Okay, so if you see down here, it says JD Estrada Writer. So if you look for that on YouTube, on Twitter, on Instagram, or on Facebook, you're going to find me. If you just look for JD Estrada, you might find someone from the Philippines, and I'm sure their content is awesome, but it's not me. My books are available on Amazon. Pretty soon I'm going to have copies of this book in a local bookstore in Puerto Rico called Tazas y Portadas. I always direct people to support local and small businesses that are pushing to support the local communities, because if your book can go a ways to help people that are really having a good positive impact, then why the hell not?
Indeed, why the hell not? And I do have the book linked in the description if you want to check it out. So, and I'd like to thank you for being our guest today. It was a pleasure chatting with you as always. Oh. And he's also going to be on Spilling Ink tonight. So
yeah, I double booked myself and I didn't realize, and I was like, oh wow, I have 2 shows. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm sure he'll have more interesting things to chat on that show, and I'll be watching it too, because I watch that show every week. And so join us tomorrow for another author. We've got R.G. Long with us tomorrow. So we'll see you then. Bye for now.
Okay.